My name is Matt, and welcome to episode 8 of Small Talk Tech, the podcast interview series where I look to uncover more similarities than differences in what makes people in tech tick. Laura Lee Emshey is our guest today, and she talks about pitching at South by Southwest and running a startup. We also go over her thoughts on the future of immersive technologies and some of her favorite podcasts. The next episode of Small Talk Tech starts now.
When I finished my master's at NYU, I was looking for work in New York, and that turned out to be really difficult. And I actually ended up finding a job in Australia working on an LNG plant, which is a type of gas plant on an island off the coast. So I packed up my life in New York and I went to Australia with 2 bags, as you can do when you're, 22 and don't have anything keeping you in one place. So I got to work there. I was working in, I guess you could call it like database management in Australia. And being there and being in the field, I really saw a lot of the problems that the industry was having. And, there's so much room for innovation. I couldn't stop thinking about when I was at NYU, NYU Poly, which is like their Polytech Institute. This was back in like 2012. So they had a very rudimentary set of AR glasses. And I couldn't stop thinking about them. And I was like, there has to be a way where we can take this technology and inject some innovation into the industry. So when I came back to the States, I was in Australia for 2 years, and I came back to the States, moved to Houston this time, surprise, surprise, oil and gas. And I started developing this idea for what would become Future Sight. And this is a kind of a funny story. I put together a pitch deck because I'd pitched before in New York, and trying to shape it and get the story and the narrative and what exactly the problem was and the solution and all of this. And a bunch of girlfriends got together and we had a ladies coloring and wine night. And after everyone had had like 2 glasses of wine, I kind of was like, I'm going to practice my pitch, and just, got out the printed pitch deck. And I was like, I need you guys to give me feedback. And, I went through it. And one of the girls that was at the coloring night, who I'd met before, really liked the idea. And she actually ended up becoming my co-founder. That's Sophia, and she's our COO now. And she comes from product management background, so kind of complementary to my technical field experience. We worked on the idea for probably more than a year, and I ended up moving to Los Angeles in between. So I was in LA for a while, which actually turned out to be great because I went to LA Tech Week, and there's a very big virtual reality community in Los Angeles because of the movie industry. So I met lots of great people there. Eventually I came back to Houston, and I met with a friend in San Francisco who was happened to be an investor. And he kind of said to us, he's like, what are you guys doing? You need a technical co-founder. Here, go find one. And he pointed us to Unity 3D has like a matchmaker careers page, and it was like internet dating, but for a developer. And we happened to find someone in Dallas. We wrote her an email, and she was like, yeah, this is great. Come up to Dallas and meet me. So we drove up there, and we went out for coffee, and we ended up sitting there and talking for 8 hours.
So actually like a good date.
Yeah, like it was funny. We went from having like just coffee at Starbucks in Dallas, and we were talking, and we'd kind of shown her what we were working on before. And she was like, do you want to come to my house and meet my husband and my dogs? And we're like, yes, of course. So we went and met her family, and then we all went out for ice cream. So it was like a good first date. And then after Vina came aboard, things really kicked off, and we actually started doing the more stereotypical like startup development stage of the venture. And that was maybe, I think we met Vina a year ago now. So it was a year in between bringing on a technical co-founder and when we did South by Southwest.
You got to pitch there, which is super exciting, and I'm sure equal parts nerve-wracking as well. Could you walk us through the process of how that exactly came to be?
Sure. It was actually Vina's idea. She was sort of dumbfounded that we hadn't been applying to more opportunities like South by Southwest. And she'd been a couple times. She was like, yeah, just put in an application. Like, the worst they can do is say no. We naturally found out about the South by Southwest application not too long before it closed, which seems to happen to us a lot. So we did up our application. You have to pay to even apply to get in, which I didn't know.
Oh.
Yeah, it's $200 or $300.
I guess it's not that bad.
No, it's not bad. And when you're a scrappy startup, like every dollar counts.
Yeah.
I believe, I'll have to look this up. I believe you get your money back if you're not selected.
Oh, well, that's nice of them at least.
I think that's how it goes, or at least I'm pretty sure last year when we applied, that's what it said. But we submitted an application in, I think, November, and then we heard back in December that we had been selected to pitch in March, and we weren't allowed to tell anyone until like January the 5th. So we had to keep it a secret until South by Southwest made it public. And yeah, in January, we were allowed to tell everyone. We didn't know at the time that if you're a presenter, South by Southwest helps you get like hotels and everything. So we went out and booked an Airbnb on our own, which turned out to be an interesting experience, but that's another story. If you're presenting or speaking or leading a panel or anything like that at South by Southwest, they give you a complimentary pass, which is a good tip if you can't afford to go buy your own pass. You can get in as a speaker. And they gave us passes. We showed up in March, the day before, and I am not a public speaker by any stretch of the imagination.
Same, so I feel your pain.
Yeah, and I've been practicing the pitch like all day. I actually recorded myself saying it once perfectly or close to perfect, and then I would just play it over and over again on my phone. And it is mortifying to listen to yourself in general on recordings. So I just listened to the pitch over and over again. We sent it to like every friend, investor, mentor. We sent it to everyone before to get as much feedback on it as we could before I started memorizing it. And I know there are some people that can just like get up there and just say what they need to say and then that's it. But I'm not one of those people, so I needed to have a script. Yeah, so we showed up on the day. It was very organized. I was quite impressed the amount of people that they had to coordinate and move around, but it all went very smooth. And when it was our turn, we'd been watching the pitches kind of all day and seeing just, to see what the process was, and then also to listen to, all these cool startups that are happening. And there was a session before us where they were talking about like using drones to help farming and looking at water levels in the atmosphere so you can tell like if your crops need more water or less water, like really cool things. Kind of watched that all day, and then when it was our turn, they shuffle you into like a green room before. It's not actually green.
That's a shame.
When we were walking around and we were looking for the green room, I was actually looking for like some green paint on the wall or something, and like it's not actually green. There are cookies though.
I guess that helps a little bit.
Yeah, when you're like shaking with nerves, stuff some cookies into your face, it'll all be better. Yeah, right before they bring you out, you sit in the front row, and then it looks very casual. Like if we videoed the whole thing, so you can go watch that if you want to see what it looks like. But they hand you a mic, you go up there and deliver your pitch. There were about 250 people in the room, maybe 300. And then you go and sit back down and watch the rest of the pitches. And honestly, I was so nervous. I cannot remember what the person after me was pitching about. But they were all really great startups and really cool ideas. And we had a great time. And we did that right away. So we arrived, we did the pitch on our first full day there. And then we had the rest of the time to just go explore South by Southwest. And we had so much fun.
Going back to the pitch itself, have you watched the video of yourself giving the pitch since then? Because I kind of have a similar situation with like recording the podcast, that I started off despising my voice. Now I can kind of tolerate my own voice when I have to hear it for hours on end. So I'm just a bit curious. Have you ever revisited that, or is that going in a time capsule and, maybe in 10 years when you guys are, a unicorn and get picked up and all that, you'll go back and say, wow, that's kind of how we started out?
I would have loved to have been able to put that video in a time capsule and like never had to look at it again. Sadly, we did a vlog of the trip, so I had to go back and edit all the footage. So I've watched myself give that pitch like probably 10 times. I think it went pretty well from a performance delivery standpoint. Obviously, it's pretty subjective, but the one thing that gets me every time is I didn't enunciate between million and billion when I was talking about the numbers. It sounds like I say $1 million and I meant to say $1 billion. And that kind of matters, when you're delivering information to people, there's an extra factor on top of that. Mm-hmm. And that's like the one thing that gets me. But yeah, I've had to listen to it so many times. And like, I hope this gets easier one day, because listening to yourself talk,
Do you have any other kind of tips that you've used to prepare for any sort of pitches or, maybe sort of like general high importance meetings like that at all?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to doing the recording and listening to it back, writing it out, like writing the script out, also really helps me. When I was in school, that was one of the big ways that I studied, was I would write my notes out, sometimes again and again until I got it. Depending on what it is, if you're going to, South by Southwest was a very high energy, it's a little bit of a performance kind of event. So before I went up, I wanted to be kind of high energy, and like I was definitely nervous. So I had that going, but nervous energy is kind of different to being like high energy. So I wanted to be like a little bit pumped up for it. So when I was waiting, if I could have listened to like a really awesome song before, I would have, but just the way it was set up, I couldn't do it at that time. But yeah, try and have the right energy, get yourself in the right space that you're projecting the energy that's appropriate, like for that meeting or for a speaking event or anything like that. I do not have the best posture either. And like body language and how you're standing and how you're holding yourself is really important when you're in front of an audience. So before it was my turn to go up, we were like out in the hallway and I was running through the lines, and I got my co-founder and my fiance to kind of make sure like I was holding myself correctly. I didn't realize this until I went back and watched the footage, but what you do with your hands is obviously also important. And you don't want to be fidgety, but you still need to like move and have movement. So like rehearsing in front of a mirror, or if you can record yourself and then watch it back, to make sure you have enough hand motion that you don't look like a robot. And when I was watching the footage back, I was like, I could have like moved a little bit more naturally. And I felt like I was like throwing my hands in the air and doing all these great hand motions. And I looked at it, when I watched it back, I was like, oh, I'm barely moving at all. Probably goes without saying, if you're speaking about something, or if you're going into a big meeting, being really confident in what you're speaking about. Like if you know that you've researched everything properly and you know all there is to know about it, if someone lobs a question at you, you're hopefully be able to answer it with some grace. And just having that confidence that you've researched enough before, or that you're an expert in whatever you're talking about, helps as well. So if you're not, just set the time aside to get up to speed on everything. That's probably more applicable to meetings and public speaking. They don't usually do Q&As at those. Sometimes you have the assumption in your head that if you're not an expert at something, that there's nothing you can do. And you can research the life out of something to make sure you're prepared. But yeah, confidence is key.
Augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality are part of the current bleeding edge of new technologies at the moment. Obviously, while it's impossible to predict, as someone who's kind of on the inside, where do you see these reality systems taking us in the future?
So I think, and this is going like extreme long term, we divide those three up right now along the Milgram scale as being, separate technologies. I think ultimately they're all just going to be kind of one. Like if you had a piece of hardware like smart glasses or whatever, they would be able to go from being augmented to virtual depending on what you're doing. In the more immediate future, virtual reality does lend itself to entertainment and gaming, probably the most. I think that will be the first industry that we see and that we are seeing really implementing virtual reality for obvious reasons. When you have a VR set on, you can't really walk around, not safe. I see some great stock photos of people with like a VR headset on, like riding a bike. And I'm like, what?
Hopefully stationary, but from the sounds of it, I don't think that's the case.
I assumed like, cause for the sake of the photo, they probably weren't actually moving, but I'm like, what would you use this for? So probably see virtual reality really take off in gaming and movies. And I can talk more on the entertainment side from my experience in Los Angeles. But I see for augmented and mixed reality, definitely that's going to be enterprise, like B2B solutions first. Then we'll see it bleed out into more consumer applications. And I mean, I'm a little bit biased because my product that we're building is a B2B application, but that's really where we're seeing like the most growth at the moment. I'm sure everyone remembers Pokemon Go last year. That was a mixed reality application that was in gaming. It's kind of a taste of where that industry might head. But the technology really lends itself to allowing you to view information overlaid over whatever you're looking at. And that information is more applicable in a lot of B2B applications, like for working, for work, or, in engineering, in construction, in design, in operations and maintenance, things like that, which are very information heavy jobs.
This kind of just popped in my head too, but I could even see, I'm sure you're familiar with Pinterest, how a big bulk of the popular things that are on there are a lot of DIY projects. So it could even be interesting, if they entered like the augmented reality space of like, take your iPad out and here's like a virtual schematic of how to, build this tapestry or so on and so forth. I could definitely see a lot of non-gaming solutions, but do you feel like that there's kind of a big quantum leap that's going from B2B to the consumer, or do you think that might only be one or two short pivots away before we start seeing kind of more widespread adoption, maybe even in that's kind of a application?
I think it'll be a couple small steps away. It's really the challenges for it to be consumer friendly are really making the UI and the UX something that is intuitive and easy to understand, because, we have to apply the Maya principle here. If it's too different, people won't want to use it. But then also being able to build up that augmented and mixed reality content to have something, if it was like a DIY Pinterest thing, which is a great idea and something we'd hope to be able to provide one day, but having the content to feed into that and having the people that know how to build that, it's sort of like the problem we saw with 3D printing. You can buy a MakerBot today. You can go 3D print things right now, but having the ability to build the model so that you can 3D print things is not something everyone can do. A lot of the times, like when you go to build a MakerBot, whatever, they'll have some like preloaded 3D models in there. So you can, like, oh, I want to 3D print a phone case. They'll have like a template for one, and then you can go in and like tweak it and add things.
Right.
I see sort of a similar not problem, but just challenge with getting augmented and mixed reality applications out to the public is we need to be able to build that content, and it needs to be easy to do, or we're going to run into the same problem that we saw with 3D printing, which is like, it's great, but no one knows how to do this. I think the technology's there, and some of it is, just learning how do we make this easy for people so that they can do it themselves. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but I think once we crack that, I think it'll be pretty quick.
Compared to my other guests I've had on before, you're kind of a bit of an outlier as an operations manager, but the great part of that is that you get to stick your fingers in kind of a little bit of everything as far as, what's involved in the startup environment. If you've had one, what's been the biggest headache that you've learned the most from being in that position? Probably,
it's not a headache, but having to learn patience for things. What I kind of learned from that is you really need to ask. And like, if you need help with something, like put it out into the universe and ask for help, verbalize or condense down exactly what it is you need and put it out there. And that's the only way you're going to get anything back. But like I said, when we started this, I had no idea how long things were going to take. And we hit so many roadblocks along the way, and just being like, come on, is this ever going to change? Are we ever going to find an answer to this? Are we ever going to find a solution? You have to ask. And, a lot of the time you'll get something back eventually.
I don't want to say, I guess in a way it is kind of self-reliance, because I feel like it's almost ignorant if you kind of stay in that mindset and never reach out. And I'm sure that's probably where a lot of startups fail. I'm talking completely outside of, my lane, I guess, so to speak, because I have no experience with startups, but just kind of from the outside looking in, I feel like there could be a lot of them that could be more successful if they only learn to not be in their own bubble so much.
There's being in a startup now and, having your own company is kind of cool and trendy. And I think when you look at other people's journeys, and it makes it seem like, oh yeah, it was this like cool hip thing they were doing. And then all of a sudden they went from nothing to having this great company. And it took like 6 months and everyone's a millionaire or a billionaire. And that's just not the case. And we never really went into it being like it was doing entrepreneurship because it was cool. It was really born out of a need, because I was like, I want this solution to exist. I want this thing to exist, and it doesn't. This is playing on the patience thing. We looked for probably 6 months all over the States, all over the world for a company that was either making a product that would solve our problem or that was close to it, that was, maybe working on it, so that we wouldn't have to go and do this ourselves. And we took dozens of phone calls, emails, we talked to companies, and like at the end of the day, we were like, okay, no one's doing this. And what's your only option then? They're like, well, then I guess we're going to have to do it ourselves. And that was kind of that was right before we bought on Vina, but it was one of those things. We just had to go through it and know that no one is doing exactly what we need. We're going to have to do it ourselves. And that process took time.
Yeah.
And there was hindsight is 2020. If I was going to do this all over again, I could look back and be like, yeah, no, we don't need to spend 6 months doing that. That's 2 weeks worth of research done.
It seems like today, especially in our social media driven world, entrepreneur, startup rather, founder, or CEO is like a cool thing to put in your Instagram bio. But I feel like there's a lot of people who are definitely talking the talk versus walking the walk. Yeah,
for sure. People would ask me if like, oh, are you an entrepreneur? Are you, and try to give it a label. And to this day, I still say co-founder because I'm afraid to put that label on it. And I really feel like it is arbitrary, but you can call yourself an entrepreneur when your company has made you your first dollar.
Yeah.
For me anyway, that's like when you reach that, and again, arbitrary, but when you reach that milestone, then I'm okay with using the E word. And when we went through all of the legal incorporation, which is probably a podcast on its own, but when we went through all of that, they assign everyone titles and everything. And they're like, well, you're the CEO, so you're going to get that title. And I was like, I don't, are you sure? And they were like, yes, that's you. They had to, put all of that on all of the documents. And it was like a surreal thing to look at.
Could you please describe the first 90 minutes of your day, being as specific as possible? So for instance, if you wake up early, what time do you tend to wake up? If you drink coffee, what kind do you drink?
First 90 minutes. So I get up at 5:30. Which is early. If it's a weekend, it's usually later, like more 7. Get up first thing, do all of the bathroom routine, wash my face, brush my teeth, brush my hair, and get everything ready for work. I'll grab like a water. I have a kind of a long commute to work, so while I'm in the car, I'll line up some podcasts, and I'm a bit of a podcast fiend. Whenever I talk to people, first word out of my mouth is, hey, did you hear on this podcast? And obviously they didn't, because they don't listen to the 50 podcasts I have in my library.
I don't mean to interrupt, but what are some of your top ones you're listening to? Obviously omitting me. Like, for instance, I've actually recently found one that's my fiance has been listening to more and more of like kind of the serialized stuff. Like it's kind of more so like the the storyline based, not necessarily interview like I do, or informational, but I don't want to say junk food because it's definitely higher than that. Like for instance, I found out about this one called Sandra that has a couple famous actors and actresses in it, and I've been loving that one so far. So I'm kind of curious to hear what's kind of your top like 3 or 4.
I try to kind of mix it up between the educational, informational ones, and then I'll throw in like a for fun, more like narrative serial one to break it up. But right now I just started listening to Masters of Scale. I'm only like 2 episodes in, but they're 40-minute long episodes, and I'm like, I want to listen to all of them.
Yeah.
I also binge listen to podcasts, so there's that too. Women in Business and Technology, which is done by it's a Microsoft podcast. The Skimm'd started a podcast called Skimm'd from the Couch, and they've put out a few episodes, and I listened to them immediately. Love How I Built This and Freakonomics. Then the more narrative, storytelling, less informational ones. I really like this expat podcast called The Bittersweet Life. And it's done by 2 American expats, and one is in Rome, and then the other one moves around all over the place. And it's just fun to listen to be in your car and like listen to someone talking about walking down a street in Rome. And like, it's a nice little piece of escapism. And I wish I had my phone with me up here because I could look up exactly what I have. I listened to Serial when it aired, and I really liked that. I have a bit of a journalism background, so I liked the kind of reporting, storytelling vibe of that one. I listen to Gary Vee's podcast as well.
Yeah, that's another good one. I listen to that one all the time.
Yeah, I like listening to that one like first thing Monday morning because he's like, just stop whatever you're doing and just do it. Whatever's holding you back, just do it and do it now. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's get going Monday morning.
Yeah, I bet you wish you had that one before the South by Southwest presentation. That might have helped bring your energy a little bit higher too, because he does the same thing for me.
Yeah, and he was at South by Southwest as well. He dropped in. It wasn't like on the schedule. He just like showed up and crashed one of the panels. Cool. Yeah.
I'm definitely going to check out the expat one because that sounds super interesting because my fiance loves watching like travel vloggers and stuff. And she's like, she burns through podcasts because she has like an 1.5 hour commute one way each way every day. So she'll probably love listening to that one herself too. If
you are listening to the Bittersweet Life, disclosure, I was on one of their episodes, but it's way later on. It's a good show. I'm biased because I was on it, but the other episodes are far better. And you should start at the beginning, episode 1, and actually listen to the whole story arc because it's really good. The way they record it, you feel like you're in the room with them. Anyway, no, I have to have I have a coffee, or there's this one kind of tea that I found recently it's a black tea, like pu'er tea. I don't know. They have it at David's Tea, and I've been drinking that to try to offset the coffee a little bit, and I really like that. I make sure I work out every day. I'm kind of a creature of habit, so I go to the gym every day, kind of no matter what. Even if I don't want to work out and just go like walk on the treadmill for half an hour, I have to do that. And I think that's really important. Like if I'm stuck on something at work and I can't figure out the answer, like I will go for a walk, I will go work out, go lift some weights. And I don't know, it like resets my brain so I can come back and kind of look at it with fresh eyes.
What's something you're obsessed with?
I have a couple things actually. We already went over podcasts, so I'll like leave that. I get really obsessed with like one podcast and I'll listen to everything. I've been really obsessed with YouTube lately and the YouTube Twitch thing that's going on and seeing who's moving over and who's not. So I've been watching that, but then a specific YouTube channel I found, the CEO of Showpo, which is an online clothing brand. They started doing daily vlogs and they're really high energy and they're really fun. I love watching those. It's obviously not related to the industry I'm in, but it's just really cool to see like what happens in another industry, and like their office culture seems really fun and cool. And I'm like, I kind of want to have that one day. Yeah, nice goal to set. Yeah, so that's kind of nice, like not eye candy, but like it's just fun to watch. So I've been obsessed with that. And they make like short, like 2 to 3 minute videos, which is not that common on YouTube anymore. Most people are going the other direction and posting like 20 or 30 minute ones. Yeah, I've noticed that too, definitely. There's a lot more home for long form content on there. Whereas I remember back when YouTube first started getting popular that everything was, short, like max 5 minutes, if that. Yeah, so there's those two things. And this is completely unrelated to tech. Whale sharks. Whale sharks? Yes, whale sharks and whale shark migrations. That is definitely specific. So that's probably honestly my favorite answer I've gotten for that question. I'm not going to lie. Yes. So what about them are you so obsessed with? Is it just the sheer size of them? Like, did you have marine biologist aspirations from a young age and came across those? How did that crop up? So it's funny you should say that because I actually did want to be a marine biologist up until about 9th grade. And then I figured out how much school you need to become a marine biologist. And then I also realized I get seasick quite terribly. Ooh. So when I was in Australia and just like, in my travels, swimming or scuba diving, snorkeling, whatever, while whale sharks are migrating by has been something that I've always wanted to do, but the stars have never really aligned that I was in the right place at the right time. When I was in Australia, I was there at the right time. If I had flown across the country and driven like 6 hours through the outback, I could have made it to Ningaloo Reef and swam with them there, but it didn't work out. And then we were going to go to the Philippines in January just gone by and go to Cebu and swim with them there. And that didn't happen. The whole trip didn't happen. So now we are looking at going to the Maldives on our honeymoon. And whale sharks migrate through the Maldives. So I have been watching. That might be a perfect storm. Honeymoon, whale sharks. They're apparently kind of around in that region, like year round. They don't migrate. They're just there. But you have to if they're sighted you have to be staying at the right resort that does this or the right hotel or whatever. But if they see them or if they're spotted, because there's people monitoring whale sharks in the Maldives full time, FYI, if you're looking for a job that will allow you to be on permanent vacation. I have this app, you can take a photo of them and it does pattern recognition. It'll match the whale shark stripes on their back and match it up to see if that particular one had been sighted before. But
that's insane.
Yeah, right. I know they can do that with shark fins, like great white sharks. Their dorsal fin has a unique like fingerprint signature outline or whatever. So they can, if you get a photo of the dorsal fin, they can tell you who it is, if that shark's been tagged or not. So if you're at one of these resorts and they spot one, they throw you on a boat, they take you out there, they figure out what direction they're going in, and they just kind of drop you in the water in front of them, and you sit there and watch them swim by. And that's what I want to do. So I've been tracking to see where they are and how many sightings and what the weather conditions are like and all that stuff. So obsessed with whale sharks.
If you could get a billboard and have anything written on it or pictured on it, as I found out from other answers before, what would it say or have on it, and why?
I think if it had to have a picture of me on it, it would just have like one word, like innovate or resilience. I was going to say something like solve big problems, but then if it had a picture of you next to it, you might not want yourself associated with a big problem. So
yeah,
maybe just like one word, like innovate, resilience, something like that. Vina, our technical co-founder, got asked sort of similar question about having a poster with her picture on it for an event or something. And they were like, what should we, if you could have anything written here, what would you write? And she's like, oh, she said that she would write, I'm a robot underneath. And I was like, that's actually genius, because that just provokes so many questions.
Yeah, and I guarantee you that would be the most popular poster that people would be talking about.
Yeah.
Hands down. But yeah, I think with that, we're pretty much good. So where can people find you? What are you working on currently? Obviously, the startup info, I'm sure people would like to know as well. And yeah, here's your soapbox, and you can feel free to share all that info. Yeah,
for sure. We're online in all the usual places. You can check out the startup at www.futuresight-ar.com. I'm on Instagram. I post there pretty regularly, and my handle is just my name, lauralee.emshey. We did start a YouTube channel where we're trying to kind of document the startup, and anytime we have something cool to share or a milestone, we make a little video about it. And that one is called Tech Founders on YouTube. And then I have a YouTube channel as well, which is mostly just travel videos. If you want to check that out, it's also just my name, Lauralee Emshey. I'm on Twitter. I don't tweet that much these days, but Lauralee_E. And I think you can find our startup on Instagram and Twitter, also just at FutureSight.AR in those places. If anyone has suggestions of what kind of videos or content that you'd like to see out of an AR startup, please let us know. We really love making content and storytelling and showing people what goes into this, because we have more of a B2B product at the moment. So trying to show and connect with people as much as we can is great. We do hope to have a consumer product one day as well. So when we're ready to share that, you can find us at all those places.
If you had one question you could ask the audience, what would it be? And we'll leave it here.
Oh, well, since I cheated, I'll just use my previous question. If you could see kind of behind the scenes of a tech startup, what kind of content would you like to see across YouTube, Instagram, the social medias? Yeah, just what would you find interesting? We love making all of this content, so we're happy to do it.
If you made it this far, thank you for listening to Small Talk Tech. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and over at smalltalktech.com. If you like what you've heard, the best way to help us out early on is to leave us a review on iTunes. Finally, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them directly to matt@smalltalktech.com. That's MAT@smalltalktech.com. Thanks again.